thing that's driven me since
we've been good at starting things, and we've been
way that I would guide people to try to.
The reason I was able to attract remarkable.
I always say, like, hey, start a band.
And I credit teaching to like that.
It's like math homework. Like, you have to show your work. Like, how did you get here?
They said it couldn't be done, but here we are, episode 50 of Overtime. I'm Dan Cederholm. This is Dribble's official podcast. Actually, no one ever said it could be done, but here we are anyway. 50 episodes, pretty cool milestone. And I feel so fortunate to be able to do this and host this show and basically learn from some amazing talent out there. And I feel really lucky to be able to do this. And this is a special episode for a few reasons. One, it's our 50th episode. Two, it kicks off season 4 for us. So this is the first episode of season 4. And also, we're going to be looking back today at 2018 as a whole and pulling out some of our favorite clips from all the interviews that we've done. It's pretty cool because there's some common themes that emerged from talking to all the folks last year that were kind of unplanned. And I thought that was really interesting. Things like how to get clients that you want to get from side work. Learning by teaching was a big theme that popped up in several places. Having a sense of humor and fun in what you do, persistence. There's just a lot of stuff that came out of all the different folks that we interviewed. This episode is brought to you by PageCloud, which is an extremely cool drag and drop website builder, and I'll be talking more about PageCloud later on in the episode. Oh, and before we get started, we want to hear from you. We want to make this podcast the very best podcast it can be in 2019, and we have a survey for you, a short survey, a couple questions about how you listen to the podcast, and if you have any feedback for us, we'd love to hear it. So check out the show notes in this episode for the link to the survey, and we'd really appreciate if you'd fill that out for us. Let's get started with the first episode that we actually did a year ago with Andy J. Pizza. He's host of Creative Pep Talk podcast. And this is a good one to start off with because Andy starts by talking about finding his gift and how he found his gift and how you can too. And embracing kind of what's weird about you in order to make you unique and embrace your gift as well. So here's Andy.
The thing that's driven me since I was young even was this idea that I think it's best summarized. I always talk about this quote by Picasso where he said, the meaning of life is to find your gift and the purpose of life is to give it away. And I think that the meaning of life is finding your gift is the first part of that. And I think that in our society, we think that you find your gift through like a 30-minute career aptitude test, right? Like that you're going to find the meaning of life in this, like just, little navel gazing or self-reflection or a Myers-Briggs test or something. And I think that the thing that I think has served me better than anything else is that I've always seen finding my gift as a journey. And I've never been satisfied with like anything but the real thing. And I feel like I always had a sense, even though I don't feel like I'd ever properly tasted that exact sweet spot, I always felt like I had like a metal detector that was telling me that I was, when I was getting warmer or when I was getting colder. And basically in that Picasso quote, I think there's also like the definition. You can kind of extrapolate the definition of a gift. And in my opinion, it's like, what's weird about you that other people want? And, I always say like, if you have something weird about you that that helps other people, it's a superpower. And if you have something weird about you that doesn't, it's an abnormality. And I think like a lot of creative people, myself included, have spent tons of time in a kind of self-obsessed place, obsessed with this weird thing that we're into or this weird thing that we can do. And it's more of an abnormality than it is a superpower, which is a problem if you want to create a career on the back of it. If you just are doing it to express yourself and you're not worried about, or you don't feel called to, do it for a living, that's fine. But for me, I always felt like it's either this or I'm going to have to fake insanity and be taken care of in some kind of home because I don't have anything else. Like this is what I know how to do. It's the only thing that kind of makes sense to me. And so I feel like the first half of my journey was like just a series of science experiments. Like I'd have a hypothesis of what I think, based on the data I have, this is my hypothesis of what I think my that gift is going to be. And I would do like a personal project to kind of test it out and invest in that path and then kind of assess how it went and then kind of press on or pivot. And this is kind of like, looking back, it didn't feel that clear to me, but now I have this kind of system that I think about because I go on to try to help other people do the same thing. And by no means have I feel like I completely found it, but I definitely feel like I made a lot of progress. So anyway, all that to say that that was kind of the process of getting to Creative Pep Talk.
Okay, it's a couple cool things here. Andy finding his gift and then giving it away in the form of helping people through his Creative Pep Talk podcast. I think his journey in getting there is really inspirational, and it kind of reminds us that, find what's different and weird about you and turn that into a passion project. And for Andy, that was his podcast. What's cool is how he got there. And, he went on to sort of explain how he'd never done a podcast before and how he started.
Directly after that moment was when I started to conceive of doing the podcast as it is now. And I'd never done the podcast up to that time. Because I was like, I've got to figure out, basically, again, take this hypothesis and kind of prove it with a project. And I just thought the only way I'm going to get momentum behind this and start getting invited to conferences and stuff is if I take the reins in my hands and like create basically an online portfolio of talks. I think as I went through kind of mastering the art of the side project, which I haven't done, but, working on this idea of like, how do you make personal work that really pushes things forward in a direct, deliberate way? And so one of the things that's always happening is, a portfolio proving that you can do what you want to get hired to do. And that was definitely a part of it. But I will say that more than anything, the reason why I think that there's really like some kind of magic sauce on this thing isn't because of me at all. It's just because it's such a part of my passion and my history.
And there it is, folks. You've got to be passionate about what you're doing and what you're creating and putting out in the world. And that certainly comes through in Andy's work for sure. And speaking of passion projects, we sat down with Jim Coudal last year, and creator of Field Notes, Jewel Boxing, Layer Tennis, a whole bunch of different side projects that Jim has been successful with. And it was really great to sit down with him and hear, how he got to where he is, which, as it turns out, is a pretty good place to be.
We've been good at starting things, and we've been pretty good at managing them, and we've been excellent at shutting them down.
Wait a minute, can you be good at shutting things down? Jim goes on to explain that it's all about trying new things and then seeing what sticks.
Try stuff out, and if it's a moderate success, try to figure out how to make it a bigger success. And if you can't figure out how to make it bigger, then go on to the next idea.
I love this thought, that not every business needs a business plan or massive planning behind it. It can just be something you want to try, something you're passionate about, that you enjoy, you want to see in the world, and then you see what works and what doesn't work. This is how Dribbble started, really. It was a side project, and it grew, and it was a slow road to grow, and that's okay. What's cool, too, is that Jim goes on to talk about, the definition of success and maybe redefining what that means. And success doesn't necessarily mean that everything you create is going to be profitable or last forever. Sometimes you can get success just from the path of doing it and learning from it.
Things can be okay successful. You know what I mean? It's not like, well, this is either going to be a success or failure. And that's not to say that we haven't done plenty of things that have been abject failures too. But I think that, don't underestimate getting out of bed and wanting to go to work as part of the equation of success or failure.
Man, Jim is smart. Not everything has to be a quote-unquote success from the outside to be valuable. I love that. The path that we take to create things and try new things is success, oftentimes success in itself. And that's just wonderful advice. And this idea of like persistence, this theme of persistence and trying until it works, is a theme that carried over into one of my favorite episodes of last year, back in February, with Debbie Millman.
It's very rare to have the Jessica Walshes and Jessica Hisches and the Timothy Goodmans who come out of the gate and hit the ball out of the park first pitch.
Right.
It's really rare. For every one of those, there's probably 100 or 200 or 300,000 people that are slogging away at trying to figure it out. And to those people, because I was one of those people, I say keep trying, and keep trying with self-generated work. I don't think it's possible to make a name for yourself doing work for other people. I think that the way you make a name for yourself is doing original work on your own, which doesn't mean you have to quit your job to do it. I was doing Design Matters while I had 2 full-time jobs, one at Sterling Brands and one at the School of Visual Arts. So I had a day job at Sterling and a night job at SVA, where I've been running a graduate program. So you make the time to do what you want to do. And that gets back to the other thing that I say all the time, which is, busy is a decision. If you say I'm too busy to make self-generated work or to make work that I feel is different or attempts to be original in some way, then it's just not a priority. It's just not something you really, really, really want to do, because we somehow find the time to watch Game of Thrones or House of Cards or Homeland or whatever it is. And so, if we have time to binge watch a TV show or spend 3 hours last night watching the Grammys, we have time to make work.
Right. So keep trying, but keep trying with self-generated work. I think that is excellent advice. It's always worked for me. Don't wait for big clients to come knocking on your door to create something. You can make up your own stuff. Make up your own brands.
The way that I would guide people to try to do something for themselves is to do something where you don't have to ask anybody's permission for something, where there aren't parameters put in place by somebody else in which to make something. And if you can sit down and try to do something with that lack of parameters, it might help guide you to something meaningful.
And I pressed Debbie on, well, is that work real? If you're just creating, say, fictitious logos or whatever. And she came back with a really great answer about, what is real.
If you're creating a graphic novel, if you're creating some type of visual identity for something that you've created, how is that not real? How is that? I think that real is a subjective word. If you mean it's not being sold in the marketplace and people aren't buying it, well, then I don't know that Design Matters would qualify because it's free.
Boom. You heard it from Debbie Millman herself, folks. The stuff you create is real, even if it's not for a client or for big money or whatever it is. It's real. And I just loved hearing that from Debbie. Yeah, so create those projects that you want to see. I mean, along those lines, we were talking with Alana Louise in another episode last year, and she kind of shared how her lifestyle online and the things she shares on her Instagram, for instance, like her fly fishing and her adventures, being herself has attracted the type of clients that she loved working with, outdoor companies.
Okay, this is my assumption because I'm not 100% sure why I got this lucky, but I think because on my Instagram, I post pictures of whatever hike I did or whatever fish I caught, that attracts a certain group of followers. And then when they discover that I'm a designer, I think that's when that type of work comes in. Right now, I'm working on a project with 2 outdoor companies that are collaborating on public land use.
Oh, great.
Which I'm a complete supporter for because the water I fish in is public. And I would love it to stay that way.
Yeah.
It just gets people excited when they realize that, I'm passionate about similar things.
By being genuine about her interests, Alana was able to attract clients in those spaces, and went on to work with really cool brands in the outdoor space. So I think take those bits of advice and put them together. Be true to who you are and your interests, but also know that you have the ability to create your own work, your self-generated work that's a reflection of the kind of work that you want to do. This episode is brought to you by PageCloud, the world's best drag and drop site builder. Unlike typical site builders, with PageCloud, you can position and style your content exactly how you want it. Right now, PageCloud is offering you the chance to earn up to $1,000 for building a PageCloud template. Just sign up at pagecloud.com/dribble. That's pagecloud.com/DRIBBBLE. And very special thanks to PageCloud for sponsoring this episode. All right, so what if you're building products and you're building teams that need to build those products? We talked to Tina Roth-Eisenberg, aka Swiss Miss, back in August, and one of the first questions, and she probably gets this question a lot, was how do you do it all? Because she has so many so many side projects that have turned into real businesses, much like Jim Coudal. But how does she do it? And we dug into it a little bit, and I think part of it is she does attract and hires really, really good talent and people that are on the same page as Tina. So here she is explaining that.
I mean, to be honest, I am someone who probably puts too much on my plate on a regular basis. But at the same time, these are all the things I'm doing are things I really care about and I want to see in the world. And then I think the luck I have is that I can get people very excited about the things I want to build. So I get to form a really, really great teams around me that support what I want to do. And, obviously without that, I could not have built all of the projects and companies that I've done. So
for Tina, her enthusiasm about the thing that she's building has to rub off on those people that want to work with her and want to build those products with her.
I think the secret sauce here is if you're someone who is really enthusiastic and can sort of ignite that fire in someone else, and then they come on and and they want to build that thing with you, then this is possible, right?
I also asked Tina, how do you find these people? How do you find these people that are just as passionate as you are about the thing that you want to build? Here she is shedding some light on that.
I mean, I feel like the things I want to build and see in the world, if you want to work with me, you have to sort of connect with who I am on a very, very deep personal level. I always say you have to kind of share a North Star and sort of the same values. Mm-hmm. But when you find those people and you give them freedom and you let them sort of bring themselves into work, I'm a very trusting person to the point where it's almost sometimes I'm like, wait, Tina, you trust people way too much. But what happens out of it is like trust really breeds magic. Like when you hire capable, smart people and you sort of have the same values and you agree on, that thing you want to build and you both see the value and you feel like it makes the world a little better, and then you let them run, then there's real magic that happens.
Trust breeds magic. That's really important to remember. I know I have trouble letting go of things and delegating and all that. But Tina makes a point to find those people that are passionate and trust them.
Well, I think it goes into the same thing again, as I said before. Like, I feel like the reason I was able to attract the remarkable team I have is because I'm very enthusiastic about things in the world, about, and I'm not just a I'm a confident person, but I'm not just confident and, I feel like the joy that comes out of enthusiasm is contagious. So enthusiasm is contagious, and contagiousness is what you need when you want to assemble a team that keeps going and when you hit bumps so I'm a big believer that enthusiasm goes along with joy, and I'm a big believer that you need to create environments that are very joyful.
Passion, enthusiasm, joy, trust. These are all important things to building good teams and building good products out of those teams. Now you have this passionate team, and how do you make sure they stay passionate and stay happy? We talked to Lyft's VP of Design, Katie Dill, back in November, and she had a really interesting, some really interesting thoughts about recognition within teams, and an article she wrote about how she applies this book, The 5 Love Languages, to making sure that managers in design teams are recognizing their team members in ways that they want to be recognized. And it turns out not everyone wants the same things.
You might consider yourself a fantastic manager and you go out of your way to make sure that people know, when you appreciate them and the great work that they're doing. And, you're tapping yourself on the back thinking that I've done a great job here. And then at the same time, you might hear from the same person and see that they feel like they're never recognized. And it's that moment where you realize, like, well, they're perhaps seeking something else. You might have thought just giving them a pay raise was enough, but they actually might find that hearing encouraging words from you matters way more than their salary. Or that, just the autonomy to take on a project on their own without, so much leadership oversight is what they've been craving, and not, tangible salary benefits. So you really do got to just kind of dig into that a little bit, because basically, we're all different and we all speak a slightly different language. And it's totally fine that we do, but if we understand, what the other person's preferences are, we can better, kind of cater our conversations so that they can resonate more. And in the article, what I'm kind of laying out is I compare it to the 5 languages, and I offer a recommendation of what these 5 languages are in the workplace, things like encouraging rewards, further autonomy, visible impact, etc., and explain what each of those things are and how you might see that want in the people on your team. And then I also do try to make the point, though, that people want all of these things, probably, but in different amounts. And I think the key is trying to understand, what are the things that are the primary drivers and motivations for folks. And that will help you understand how to really drive home your messaging when you're trying to provide recognition, appreciation, and encouragement to your team, which I think, hopefully all managers know is a really important part of getting a team, excited and driving towards the right things, and frankly, just fulfillment in their job. We all want to know we're doing the right thing. So we need to hear that from our peers and our managers.
Last April, we talked to Pablo Stanley, really talented illustrator, UX designer, educator. And he had an interesting analogy around being in a band and how that relates to working well within teams.
I always say, like, hey, start a band, start a band. And in retrospect, I understand all the things that I learned by having a band, when I was starting as a teenager and all those things. Obviously, in the moment, I didn't know that this was going to be helpful and useful and in the future me. But in the present, I remember just like if you have a band, you have to like overcome all the differences that you have, that probably the drummer likes heavy metal and that's their thing, and the guitarist really likes Latin music, but at the end you have to find a common thing, and you have to find something somewhere in the middle where everyone is satisfied and everyone's happy and everyone's enjoying what you're doing. And I think that's something that I learned as being in the band, and you have to be persistent. You have to be really good at like practicing. That if you want to do good in a show where you present your music, where you are exposed and you're vulnerable in a stage in front of people with a microphone, you want to practice a lot. You want to become great at your craft, and you only do it by just like being really good with just scheduling and being really good with communication with your band. And I see a lot of parallels with just like working with a team, with a product team where you have different roles in a team, where it's the front end, it's the designer, it's the project manager, or the product manager, and the engineer, and the back end, and all these people that are working towards the same goal. And probably there's a lot of differences between them, but at the end, they all are trying to play some tunes in front of people, and they want to do a good job at it, and they want to be proud of what they're doing. And that's something that I always say, like, hey, if you have the time, like, I mean, it doesn't have to be a band. For me, it was a band, and because I suppose I'm the creative type, or whatever that means. But some people, it's just like I don't know, that they're probably into sports. So, well, join a team, and actually learn. It's another thing that you will have to practice a lot to become good, and not practice by yourself, but also learn how the rest of the team like works, and what do they like, and how does that affect you, and how can you help them reach their goals? Because if they reach their goals, they can also help you reach your goals too.
So joining a band or a group or something that helps you understand what it means to work well within a team is super great advice. And it's worked well for me, for sure. But Pablo, tell us about how you really feel about drummers.
Usually drummers will be kind of... I don't know, they were kind of snowflakes. Is that how you say it? Snowflakes? Where it's just like, you have to be very careful with the drummer and not hurt their feelings, because the drummer, they know they're super important. They know it. They know that if the band is nothing without the drummer, you can go to a show. I mean, and more if you are in a punk rock band. That's one of the things that you can go in a show and it's just like, hey, one of our guitarists is missing, but it's okay. We're going to play it because we're punk rock. Let's do it. But you cannot do that without a drummer. You cannot just go out there without it, because then what is it? You need that beat, and they know they're really important, and you have to take care of them. So sometimes, if you're a drummer, stop being a jerk, and I suppose don't be the drummer in your team too. Be the drummer, but don't be jerk drummer, because drummers are really important, and they're the ones that keep the beat.
And now we're onto a theme that popped up several times, and that is learning by teaching, and the fact that you can teach while you're learning something, and you don't need to be an expert. And this is a topic that really resonated with me, because it certainly mimics, how I got to where I am, with really sharing and learning as I was going along, and it helped me actually learn the thing that I was trying to explain. And Pablo kicked it off for us here back in April, and explains how he learned by teaching.
Me sharing, I do have some selfish purposes behind this, and it's because it helps me learn better, and probably by being open, I let other people be more open to, and probably I can learn from them. So in a way, that's a selfish part of it, right? Whereas I also want to learn from others, and also like when you're sharing your process, when you're opening the box and telling everyone, look what I did, then you're being vulnerable, right? You're you're opening up yourself, and then it kind of it helps you like be on the mindset that number one, you have to be more careful about what you do too, and you have to understand it better. If you're going to share it with other people, then you have to deeply understand what you're doing, because then you cannot teach without understanding a little bit of what you're teaching, right? So when I started doing this, it was because of that, because I wanted to learn. And it sounds weird. By teaching, I was actually learning, because I was forcing myself to deeply understand how this thing works. And then I can explain it to other people. Once I understand it, then I'm able to put it in a way that other people can understand it too. So that's, in a way, it's my personal way of learning by teaching others. It forces me to understand things.
I just love this advice, that you don't need to be an expert. Just dive in, start sharing what you're doing while you're learning it. I mean, it's actually the reason why all these YouTube channels are huge that my kids watch. It's because it's fun and it's interesting, and I think it's easier to learn something from someone that's also in the same boat as you and that's learning, maybe at the same level that you are. We also talked to Joshua Davis, amazing visual artist. He's been around for decades, really. Made a big name for himself in the Flash world, and is now doing some amazing programmatic, artistic things. And he talked about how it's okay to give your stuff away, and how it's beneficial for him to contribute to open source.
I got this argument like years ago when I was doing it with Flash, and people will say, why are you doing this? Why are you giving away the FLAs? Mm-hmm. And most people didn't realize is that if I gave something away, I would get it back like 50 times, and 50 times people trying other things. And so I was learning. Yeah. I was learning because it'd be like, oh shit, I never thought to do that. And that would end up fueling more of the creative process. So open source is very valuable in the sense that people do contribute, and they contribute outside of what you know. And so they're going to do things
you hadn't thought of
that end up informing you.
Exactly.
So it just means that the inspiration is always moving.
Right. So by sharing as you're learning something, sharing it to the world, giving it away, Joshua is explaining that he learns from that. And that's the power of the web, really, and the power of numbers out there.
If you are willing to give stuff away, people are going to give back to you, where like literally I have sketchbooks of ideas that are spanning years of ideas that I still haven't gotten to
There's
yet.
Just not enough time.
And so there's not enough time. Yeah. There's not enough time to embrace like all these paths that people have helped, point me into certain directions. And open source does that. Open source says, hey, you have one simple idea. People will give you that idea back with 50 mutations. And so there's never a moment where I say, well, I have no idea what I'm going to do today. That's never happened to me.
Back in November, we talked with Mary Kate McDevitt, illustrator and letterer, and she reflected on how teaching helps her refine her own process and put a microscope more on the way she creates work in a way that wouldn't have happened if she wasn't teaching.
I mean, I'm really terrible at analogies, and the ones I come up with, I always talk myself out of it because they're too basic. But I'm always like, it's like math homework. Like you have to show your work. Like, how did you get here?
Right.
And that's what that class is all about. It's basically just like taking a sketch and just really carving away at it. But when I did that class, it kind of made me realize how I actually enjoy teaching and how making yourself reflect on your own process is really important. So when I was kind of creating the outline for the class, I would be like doing something, and anytime I was like, oh, I wonder if people don't realize this one little detail, to like create, I don't know, like a drop shade or something like that. That kind of, any kind of little tips and tricks that you can kind of spell out a little bit more clearly for students is really helpful. So it was really nice to just like kind of take a step back and look at my work from like a bird's eye view, basically. I'd say with teaching, just that it's like I've laid out my own set of rules to follow each project I approach. So if I feel like I start straying from my own process, then I'm like, oh, better go back and, check, do a revision or something like that. So it's helpful to, know that you have these set of steps that you have to follow, I guess. And the personal projects are usually ones where I don't follow it basically at all. And I just kind of like, I start with something where it's like, I want to draw birds and I'm going to do a drawing about birds. And then I start drawing and something pops up. And it's like, there's no brainstorming. There's no like really crazy amount of sketches.
Right.
So it's like, I like having the personal work to like loosen up a little bit and not be so precise and like have to follow, because it can feel restricting if you feel like you're just only following this one process each project. It's like, I want to let loose a little bit.
Not only is she learning by teaching, but she's also using, personal work as an opportunity to continue to experiment and refine that process that she has. And speaking about learning on the job, we talked to Rob Jenneret III about his first teaching job at a high school and teaching photography, and how he had never taught photography before. He had to learn it, and he sort of put the challenge back to the principal.
The film process, I had to learn it. As a matter of fact, during my interview, I told them like, I can learn it in 2 weeks. And you should have saw like the look on my principal's face, like, oh, really? And it was almost like, challenge accepted. I'll take you up on that. And like, I learned it in 2 weeks. Like, being that it was a new school, I had to put all the enlargers together. I had to set up the dark room. I had to unpack all the chemicals. So as I would unpack the chemicals, I would learn the nature of the chemicals and where they fit within these different processes. As far as putting the enlargers together, it prepared me for if there was some troubleshooting to do, or if one decided it wanted to malfunction, like even though somebody had to cause it to malfunction, I would know how to fix it because I put them together, basically.
That's amazing. Learning it in 2 weeks, being able to teach it, but then, having it so fresh that you're able to troubleshoot, things that happen. Rob went on to, talk about what teaching meant to him.
Yeah. And I credit teaching to like that attraction, that draw that I have. Being a teacher, like whenever you're in public or you're doing something of that nature, it adds a warmth to the whole experience because I got to know my demographic.
Mm-hmm.
I got to know what's comfortable for them. I got to have my transitions, my segues, and I got to have a certain flair to deliver whatever message it is that I'm trying to deliver, whether it's verbally, if it's written, or either visual. I put all of those different tenets and elements in effect whenever I go up there. And most of the time, I don't know what's going to come out my mouth until I watch the audience walk in.
So for the last theme that I thought we'd touch on in our wrap-up of last year is the importance of fun and play and having a sense of playfulness and sense of humor in the work that you do. Because if we're not having fun, then why are we doing this at all? Here's illustrator Lauren Dickens sharing how fun and playfulness is important in her work.
It's definitely somewhat intentional. I love making people laugh, and I like surprising people too.
Yeah.
And I also like surprising myself. And when that happens while I'm designing is probably one of the best feelings you can have as a designer, when you can step back and be like, wow, like that's really something there. I've tapped into something here. That's a really incredible feeling. So it's really not like I start a project and the goal that I've set for myself is that I want to make people laugh. Like,
right.
It's really about finding the connection between whatever I'm trying to communicate conceptually, and then tying the visuals back into that, almost like an infinite loop, if that makes sense. So injecting some wit into the work, and basically these like larger concepts, I think really, really help the work resonate with people and keeps it interesting for me, you know, doing the work. Because if you're not having fun, then why be doing what you're doing?
Amen. Also, it's a tough world out there. And how do we deal with, you know, real serious topics day after day after day? Here's why Lauren uses humor in her work.
It's kind of a lighthearted way to take on these really tough issues. I, as a human being, I would say I tend to use humor as a tool in a lot of ways, or at least humor to talk about deeper things. And so I think that it's, number one, a really great exercise for me to really gather my thoughts. And the world we live in is such a touchy place right now. And so trying to inject a little bit of humor into these concepts and trying to get a laugh out of people or bring people together in that way, I think is a step in the right direction, because it's hard to be serious all the time about these things, even though, you know, it's important.
For Midwest native Tad Carpenter, adding fun to his routine involved creating a challenge for himself, drawing a sun every Sunday. And he's been very dedicated to this, and has drawn almost 200 of these suns, each in a kind of a unique style. Here he is explaining the inspiration behind that.
Once a week seems like a very achievable goal for me. And to me, the way I look at it, play is so unbelievably important in my work, and the value of play. And a huge part of what I do is really try to remind myself how lucky we are to do this. And I feel like I never feel more alive sometimes, but this is the saddest thing I've ever said. When I'm actually creating something, I feel, I don't know, there's a feeling I get from that is something I wish I could bottle up. And that's kind of what it is me getting to make and play for myself, and not for a client, not for a specific deadline even really, but let me just kind of make things for myself and just explore new styles, explore new mediums. And at the bottom line, it's what it is it ends up being practice also for me. And I think we forget to practice, our craft. It really was me trying to find a way to kind of make something for myself and purely explore and do things for myself. But as things went on, I start seeing different needs and different kind of avenues on how this project is starting to come into people's lives in some way, potentially, and it's just a fun thing that I do. But at the bottom line, what I hope is that, through that work, it kind of brings, kind of shines, for lack of a better term, a little ray of light on their life that day. They see that thing or that object, that when it comes into their life. And I'm a firm believer that as designers, the bottom line, if you really cut through all the crap, like with design, is we're here to better the human experience. That's what it is. Bottom line, yes, navigation and communication and all these things, but at its core, design is here to better the human experience. And to me, I hope that these little exploratory things that I get to make and have fun doing, can can free people from any concerns they might have that day, or just make them, have a little smile, that's what you hope your work could potentially do.
Right, so I think this is a perfect note to end on, to remember that, we're lucky to be able to do what we do and to create and try to make people happy. And don't forget to have fun. If you can't have fun in your day job, then create your own fun on the side. I want to thank you for listening. Thank you for listening to our 50th episode. It's been a fun look back at the whole year. I'm really excited for this next season. Season 4 is going to be wonderful, and we'll see you back here in a couple weeks. Please make sure you subscribe to Overtime, and we'd appreciate it if you rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. And thanks again. We'll see you soon.